fella probably should have done before he finished up the elevator, but I'm going to do it now. It doesn't matter. They don't mention it in plans until you kind of get looking at the drawings themselves. So I'm going to take a piece of hinge cloth. I'm just going to set it between, I marked the center line there. Of course I got it on backwards. There we go. And what this is for is reinforcement for your elevator horn, nylon elevator horn. And because it's not a hinge, you pull it tight on both sides. Hold it in place with some wax paper and give it to her with the thin CA glue. And thin CA won't allow your thumb to stick to the material. And as usual, I'm good at dropping stuff. So we'll get a little more on there. There. A little extra. Give it a quick shot with the paper towel. It'll suck it up before it'll actually stick. And using the thin CA, gets that on, wicks right in, plus it hardens up the balsa. So flip her around. And the reason why I want to pull it tight on both sides is because, as you can see here, the CA worked right through around the bend. So I already had it tight, and it's already up nice and tight against the balsa in there. How I normally do this is I'd get some 30-second plywood, birch plywood, and glue that on either side. Doing it again, that's how I do it. Well, soak her up a bit. Make sure she's all pressed in with the wax paper. Quick dab with that. She's done. Camera on, that should help. Just going to put the elevator horn on now. Everything seems so huge on this little airplane. So you want the push rod, the holes in the horn to line up with the hinge point on the for the elevator and horizontal stabilizer. So you want everything lining straight up with the middle of that. I'll tell you, trying to build a model with this damn splint on is a real pain in the ass. But anyway, that's life. Get that lined up. Mark where I'm going to drill the holes. Double check. Lined up with the center. And one little piece of hardwood underneath. Now because we got this cloth on here, I use the hardwood underneath to grab the drill, just because it'll almost act like plywood. Kind of try to push it off. Yeah, got it perfect. I like that. Okay, the elevator horn, I drilled these holes out to 3/32, and same as the holes I put in the elevator are out to 3/32. Because of these screws they want us to use on them. At least I hope that's what they're for. There's nothing else in there will fit this. That's what they're for now. And it must be because they're fitting perfect flush here. I knew that was going to happen. There, another little ding I gotta fix. It's the worst part of using flat blades type screws. They slip out of there so easy, it's not funny. So, that's the elevator horn installed. Okay, to do the lead-out wires, I'm going to use the stuff they supplied. Normally, I use the braided stuff, and this time I'll just go with what they got. Especially being a control profile type, everything's on the outside. I'll go back. It doesn't tell you in the plans, but I'm going to go back 2 inches from the inside, the short end, or the inside and the short end. So I've gone back 2 inches. Bend that right around. That's pretty much what they tell you to look for. Because this is going into the bell crank, I'm going to have it a little more square. You'll have that end nice and square like that, and you won't have a curve that's going to want to tighten up in that little hole, because that's where this ends up going, in here. And you can get the bend, and you'll see how nice that's going to work. Because it's these little pliers I got at Canadian Tire seem to be just the right width to get that bend like that. And the next thing you do, I'm going to take this off. Make sure everything's nice and straight first. Make sure that's 90. Looks pretty good. And stick her back in there like that. Now what they want you to do is just bring it in and with the pliers and just kind of hold it, and give it that another 90, and without sticking it in your fingers, of course. Okay, hold them together like that, and just start wrapping it around. That's the theory. I've never done it this way before, so we'll see how that works out. I'm thinking it might be leaning back towards the braided wire. We'll see. I take a couple of bends and you'll be good. Yeah. It worked out not too bad. See, I got a couple of good bends there. There's not a chance in hell you're going to pull that off. So, what do you know? Learn something new every day. That's this setup is new to me, and then of course I'll just trim off that extra. So I get the bell crank. Continuing on, I put these little clamps on the lead outs, and that'll keep the bell crank itself from moving. And of course I put the clamp on the stabilizer and elevator, so that's locked in neutral. I use scrap balsa, and the reason being, this is not like the Ringmaster. It's got nice balsa, which is a little softer than that the old sterling stuff, which is damn near hardwood by comparison. So the balsa and the clamp, balsa's not going to damage the stabilizer, so, and the clamp is keeping everything in place. So I'm going to go with the setup that they have in the plans. The wire is one piece, the push rod. I'll just measure it up in the plan, see exactly where they want this cut. I'll do the 90° like they suggest, and just use the retainer to hold that into the bell crank. So, and then solder the coupler on. Plus I got to put the check the plans and see where they want to put the guide for that push rod, and we'll get going on that. I'm going to put paper towel between the wire and the it looks like it's touching the camera, but it's not. Back her up a bit here. And that'll, because when you solder, the flux tends to spatter around quite a bit. You don't want that on your balsa, because when you solder it, or when you go to paint it, it ain't going to stick, because this stuff is going to behave kind of like oil. It's not going to allow anything to stick to it. You can see all that bubbling, spitting going on there. That's what you're trying to avoid getting on your balsa. Now after you solder this together, you're probably wondering how you get this little guy. Well, now what this does is the open end here goes over that, holds the wire onto your control horn so it doesn't come off. Well, you might be thinking, well, I soldered that on, what am I going to, because the instructions don't mention anything about putting this thing on, to be honest with you. But it's not the end of the world. All you got to do is bring your 90 into the end here. Just rotate it, and might be a little extreme on the 90. I might be cutting that. I'll probably cut that back later, but that's what retains it on the horn. So if you plan on using this and you got everything done, you say, oh damn, how am I going to get that on? That's how you do it. Whew. Just sanding up. Okay, I'll just get this in here. And drop the washer. Gotta drop something. Every night, gotta drop something, it seems. And no crank in there. Not gonna bother putting that on yet. Creak. Here's how that works. I drilled a 1/8 hole through the fuselage. Of course, I did my usual. I got the CA glue and let it run right through. And the glue I use for that, and fuel proofing, even around the firewall and stuff, and even on ARFs. It's been lying around too long. I won't use it structurally, but it's great for doing stuff like that. So we just get in there. Now how I get this, how this works is you put a nut and washer on. I think what I'm going to do is get some really thin plywood. I got some 32nd here, and make a round patch similar to what they use for the bell crank mounts. And I'll put that on both sides, because you know you don't want to crank that. But I mean, even if you snug that down right now, it's going to damage the balsa. So that's what I'll be doing with that. And that'll keep this in good shape. And it's just regular nuts. I'll put a little bit of blue Loctite on that. And let's see over here at the elevator. Don't need this clamp on here anymore. The 90 just goes through the horn. And you bring that little screwy thing, put it on the outside here, and that's meant to retain. And I'm sure it will. I'm going to try it. It's part of the kit. And it should keep that in place. Next fun job is to put the tail skin in. Just this little piece of plywood here. So, but you want to countersink that into the tail of the airplane. So I'm just going to use an X-Acto to get the initial incision made, so to speak. I was kind of wondering, how am I going to get a slot dug in there? Well, I'll just use the good old hinge slot tool I used to do way back when for the Dubro hinges. And that'll get a little hook on the end there. Do just perfect for digging that out. Now I'm going to try to do this with my left hand. Hopefully tomorrow I'll be all done with that splint. I don't want to go down too deep. You don't want that knife to slip. That's for damn sure. I'm going to try this with the right hand. Nope. So I'm just going to make these two slits side by side, roughly the width you need. And you won't have all these jagged looking side when you're done, including the end. There. Give that a try, because this high-tech tool here isn't really sharp. It's just kind of a more or less a gouging device. ripping out chunks of balsa. Because normally with a, there we go. Once you get it started, it's not too bad. So this balsa is not, it's really nice stuff. It's not really hard. And it's not really too soft. It's really good quality stuff. Alright. Goes in like that. Nice and snug. Perfect. The old slow cure CA out. Seems to be a little plugged up in the tip there. I'll get some in the slot. This thing about CA glue, you don't have to. Remember when I used to build control lines, I used to have to let the glue dry overnight, which usually meant a good 24 hours before it was really hard. And that slow dry stuff lets you make little adjustments before it sets up. I really like it. And you get a little blast when you get her in the right spot. So that's it for the high-tech tail skid. Okay, next I'm going to solder the flat washers on the landing gear. Now what makes this a little easier is take a piece of silicone fuel line and make sure when you cut it it's really straight, 90 degrees, and then you can take the washer and it'll rest on that, and then when you solder it, it'll when it hardens up, that washer will be on there nice and square. So get the flux on her and get that going. Okay, then the thickness of the wire and the fact that I've been using silver solder with this little butane torch I've never used before, so let's see how we make out with this guy. So you only want to get the metal hot enough to melt the solder. You don't want to use the flame to melt the solder or the iron, whatever the case may be. You see the washer dancing around because of the flux underneath the Well, that worked like a damn. Yeah, there's no lead or anything in that solder, so. Wooden scrap piece of 2x4 is great for doing stuff like this. Drill holes in it. You don't have to worry about the heat transferring into it. It's an insulator. It's amazing how well that silicone holds up to that. Didn't bother it a bit. And the black you see there is just the flux. Well, there's that little piece of silicone tubing. As you can see, soldering doesn't affect it at all. Now, a little thing I should note, when you get that on your wire, you can move it around a little bit. If your wire or if your washer doesn't look square, you can move this around a little bit so that you can square up that washer, which also means you can do it crooked. But this setup works real good for soldering those washers on for landing gear. Alright, what I got going here is I took a piece of 2x4 scrap, end cut. Of course, wood being what it is today, it was warped, so I just put on the belt sander to get it squared up, nice and flat in the top and bottom. And I screwed this, what the product has is what they want you to do is solder these brackets onto the gas tank. And once it's on there, that's your mounts. And you can see they got a slot in them. You'll see that. So you can slide them up and down, because with I've never tried this before, and I know it works because I know fellows that know way more about flying these than I do. You can adjust the tank up and down, so when you're flying upright and you go inverted, if it's leaner or richer, you can move the tank up and down to get it in the right spot. I guess you initially start off center line like we used to do in the old days and just leave them there. And this allows you to make those adjustments to get the tank in the right spot. So I was thinking, like, soldering these on should be a joy. And the guidance in the manual is zip. So like I say, I came up with this. I got one screwed in, as you can see. I'm going to take this one, and I get everything sanded. I always sand things up before I solder them, and put a little bit of flux on them. I'm going to sand this shiny side up. The other side of the tank's done, and I'll screw this one in place as well, getting them nice and snug together. Not too tight, because like I say, you're going to be putting the heat. And I'll put the heat to the brass and let it transfer to the tin. And especially when you're this close, like I'm using silver solder. I'm really close to that solder joint in that overflow tube there. So this could be interesting. I'm going to use just enough heat to get this thing to flow solder, and see how I make out. Never done that before in a tank, so wish me luck. Something else I like to mention on this, being I almost did it. This is the side that solders to the tank. The slotted end, of course, is the side that goes in the fuselage. And you can see I sanded that up and then I caught it. So, of course, when you go to put the screw in that block of wood affair I made up, that'll help you, also help you prevent from pulling that groaner. Okay, there's the Hogs and Plains soldering jig for gas tanks. Let's see if it works and worth patenting. Now those clamps, I got them just snug enough to hold the tank in place on its side. You don't want a bunch of pressure on that. I want it, those screws aren't terribly tight, and it's just everything's kind of snug, but not enough to start distorting things on you. So see what happens. All right. I'm going to use a pencil torch. Soldering iron will take forever and ever. Keep the flame on an angle away from that. And it's not a very hot flame. Again, I'll just get this warm enough to hopefully just to melt the solder. And brass, it don't take long. And it's flowing beautifully on the tin as well. Getting ready, she's sucked that up real nice. I can see it just on the inside here, so I know I got her good in there. It's enough to make a fellow think he's being a wee bit successful here. Almost formed a bit of a groaner there. There we go again. And I can see the solder flowing inside, on the inside of the, in fact it came right out the other side there. And this is silver solder I'm using, so. And looks like I'm running out of butane. I'm glad to see the solder won't melt there. Oh, it will a little bit, which means the joint should be okay. Okay, that worked like a damn. So the beauty of that setup, like I said, I made adjustments, little bends to this, so that it would butt up against the side of that exactly. So everything, I screwed this one in first. Had it square, as you can see. I got some lines there, 9-degree lines. Brought the tank up against it, and then I try to get some light here. Screwed it in, as you saw. Then I brought this one in and made adjustments, put the screw, snugging it down just a little bit, just enough to hold it, and making sure it was butted perfectly against the side of the tank. Did a couple of minor little bends to do that. So then I snugged the screw down and did the soldering procedure you saw. And I loosened those screws off. That's the idea of these brackets, is to make an adjustment. And it's perfectly flat because I used a belt sander. This fellow over here. That's your ultralight model builder's best friend. And made this block nice and flat, and even sitting there under its own weight because those screws are backed off. Everything's perfectly square, perfectly flush. Now with engine vibration and everything, you don't have to worry about any of this pulling on the tank and causing cracks or anything like that. So patents pending, Hogs and Plains tank mount soldering jig. And another thing too, that's what I like to see with the solder joint. You can see the solder got to even bridge the gap a little bit here, because I could see it bubbling on the outside because the slot is actually into the bend, and you can see both sides are the same. So I got a really nice solder joint there, and looks, I'm going to do a little pressure test, make sure I didn't spring any leaks, but visually the other side solder joints didn't get affected at all. But like I say, I heat the brass bracket, let it transfer. You want it so the solder also melt on the metal tank and the brass, but not so much it's going to melt the existing solder. But it worked pretty good. The Enya 15 I'm going to use. This is the original style. I know it's got the bar on top of the piston. I think they did way back when. Put the screws in on the exhaust side before you try mounting it in the airplane. The reason being is they got to go on a bit of an angle because you're almost lined up here. So your screw's going to go on a bit of an angle. If you got it on the airplane, I've learned this many moons ago, the screw's going to go on an angle in the mount as well. And it's going to seem like you're out of kilter. And I know a fellow who did that once, and just for laughs I watched him screw with it for half an hour before I told him what was going wrong. It was rotten to me, but it was funny. So get those screws under the exhaust in first, and then she'll just slide right in place for you.